All right. So, did you know that basically all of economics can be taught in just a couple sentences? And this is coming from a book called Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, at least the general overarching theme. So, here's the cover, what you can see, all right, in case you guys want it. And it's pretty short, as you can tell. But basically, Henry Hazlitt is he was an American journalist, economist, philosopher, an advocate for free markets. So this is kind of where he's a part of that philosophy in a way that you see in the mid 20th century, where you have names like Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, so kind of the Austrian school, or more of a libertarian way of looking at pretty much the world, economics and so on, at least in this case, right? So he wrote this book for the purpose of, in his own words, to expose the common fallacies of the day. And so that's basically all the book is, quite literally. So for the preface, right? So he says, there is not a major government in the world at this moment, however, whose economic policies are not influenced if they are not almost wholly determined by acceptance of some of these fallacies. Excuse me. Right? So basically, he wrote this book. Part one is like 3 pages, and part of it is that lesson that we'll get to in a second, and then quite literally it's just 200 other pages about basically these fallacies that kind of underpin economic theory and stuff today, more or less. And he just slowly builds on it with time. So to continue, he says the effort is to show that many of the ideas which now pass for brilliant innovations and advances are in fact mere revivals of ancient errors, and a further proof of the dictum that those who are ignorant of the past are condemned to repeat it. So these fallacies, when they have reached the proper popular stage, become anonymous anyways. The subtleties and or obscurities to be found in the authors most responsible for propagating them are washed off. So basically, like you repeat something enough, it just seems to be true. It's pretty much just like, how, I guess, I want to say society, but kind of like how societal thought kind of works in a way. Eventually, if you just keep repeating something, everyone's going to start believing it, regardless of if it's true or not, or however you define that. So the lesson itself, right? And so he starts it off with economics is haunted. So the inherent difficulties of the subject that would be great enough in any case, but they are multiplied 1,000-fold by a factor that is insignificant in, say, physics, mathematics, or medicine. So the special pleading of selfish interests. To go on and continue that, I mean, everyone kind of more or less understands that to a certain degree. People are kind of always kind of looking out for themselves in a way. And so capitalism the whole idea with capitalism is like he kind of harness that and hopefully do good with it. But, obviously that's not always the case. But that's not the purpose of this video. So to continue, while certain public policies would in the long run benefit everybody, other policies would benefit one group only at the expense of all other groups. The group that would benefit by such policies, having such a direct interest in them, will argue for them plausibly and persistently. And so this persistent tendency of men to see only the immediate effects of a given policy, or its effects only on a special group, and to neglect to inquire what the long-run effect of that policy will not only on that special group, but on all other groups. This is the fallacy of overlooking secondary consequences. So basically, everything is, they're only focused on the here and now, and so on. But there's that. So to kind of define a good economist, he says they always look beyond. They look longer in time and at indirect consequences, and they'll try to look for the effect of the policy on all groups, right? So it's basically kind of taking the politician out of things in a way. But all of this is kind of to be digested down into just what the lesson is itself. So basically says like all of economics in one lesson is, to quote, the art of economics consists in looking not merely at the immediate, but at the longer effects of any act or policy. It consists in tracing the consequences of that policy, not merely for one group, but for all groups. Just kind of having a general understanding on everything. It doesn't just matter what happens to one person, it's the overall effect of things, right? So there's that. And that's pretty much it. The next one is quite literally 200 pages of these fallacies that he writes about, and basically that underpin economic thought. One of those, he gives through an example called the broken window. So basically, kind of distilled down, is some kid throws a rock through a shopkeeper's window, right? And so basically the idea is, the shopkeeper now has to pay to fix the window, right? So the glass maker gets more business, and then basically there's money moving around and we're having growth, more or less. So, but he says the shopkeeper will be out in this case, $250 that he was planning to spend on like a new suit or something. So now he has to spend money on fixing his window rather than buying a new suit, right? And so instead of having a window and $250 or a window and a new suit, all he has is a new window, right? And so, yes, there's, I guess the glazier, the glass maker, I don't know, the window maker gains business, but the tailor loses business, right? And so this no new employment has been added. No one new has been paid. There's nothing really that's created on aggregate total. It's kind of a rob Peter to pay Paul type thing. The whole destructions and so on, which is the next one. Don't let me get ahead of myself. But the people in the crowd were thinking only of the two parties in the transaction, basically the baker or the glass maker. The person who got the rock, in his example, whose window was broken, was a baker. And they forget about the third party who could have been involved, right? So it's kind of, again, just purely thinking about secondary consequences kind of shows a lot more than you would have originally. And so people just kind of lose that. His next fallacy he talks about is the blessings of destruction, which basically, kind of ramps it up to a lot more broken windows, more or less. And you could think about this like one thing that comes to mind is like Reconstruction after the Civil War and so on, and how that kind of plays effects. Obviously, that's just an idea. I haven't really brought any data with that one. It just kind of came to mind on the fly, but just as an example, right? He also talks about public works, and so on. And with this book being what it is, with so many fallacies and so on, I don't want to spend the time to go through all of them. I'm thinking I might do little separate videos or even blog posts and stuff on the website and kind of distill it further down, and kind of do a little series with it maybe. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. But it's an interesting book, definitely makes you think, and it is a lot different than it is today, especially when this was written. I think it was originally published in 1946. So it's an old one, a classic, dare I say, but yeah, there's that. Let me know if you guys want more of the fallacies and so on, and we can go in them in depth, kind of just think about it more. Like I said, the purpose for all these videos is more or less to just kind of put this stuff out there and then talk about it and gain a further understanding, because it is stuff that is applicable to pretty much everyone. Everyone has to eat, has to buy food, do all this stuff, so everyone deals in the economy to varying degrees. So anyways, I'm gonna leave this one here. I will put a card I did a video on a book, was it Banking History of the United States, by Murray N. Rothbard. I'll put him up in the corner, as well as all the other book reviews and so on. So I hope to see you guys on one of those.